Please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Colonel Joe Lewis.
You know what? I want to do something real quick because I might forget it at the end. I would like to recognize Karen Ranke. She is the mom of one of the soldiers whose daughters we were able to support, and we supported her granddaughter, Kaylee, in golf, and she ended up with a 4-year scholarship to James Madison University. She graduated last year, and she's now working. But I see these as God moments because I didn't know she was going to be here, and Kaylee's in North Carolina, so it's not like it was a local. So, all right. It's an honor to be able to speak here today. And if I say it's an honor, what does that mean? What does the word honor in that context mean? Well, it means several things. It means that I see speaking here as a privilege. I value this opportunity. I respect the Center for American Values and the people here today. Being invited to speak means something personal to me because of those whose footsteps I follow, and it makes me feel something deeply. The word honor is far more than just a word because it has many significant meanings. Things we aspire to, things that we evaluate that make someone look good or we see them as good, things like respect and moral integrity. It can mean personal accountability, like keeping one's word, as in the honor system, when someone's words are binding and you can count on them. But you don't have to be exceptional or a superhero to have honor or to behave honorably. It's not reserved for those born with special skills or the wealthy or the very lucky. It's available to anyone that makes a choice to have it and follows through on that decision. Honor is one of the core values of the Center for American Values. It's something you'll hear weaved into my story today, as well as the other two core values of integrity and patriotism. I learned about honor, integrity, and patriotism from my father. He enlisted in the Marine Corps and was in the infantry. After his initial tour, he separated from the Corps to go to college. He and my mom had one daughter and one child on the way when the Vietnam War started. And my dad came home and surprised the heck out of my mom when he said, "Hey, I just re-enlisted to go to Vietnam." And he did so because he felt he should because his brothers were going. As he was in line to board the airplane to go to Vietnam, a runner from base ops went out to him to pass along an important message to him. "Congratulations, it's a girl." So at that point, I wasn't even a twinkle in my dad's eye. And if he hadn't come home from war, I never would have been born. As a kid, I remember thinking about that and how far the ripples go forward and how things change and are different when we lose someone. I didn't know it then, but that realization would become a fundamental part of my future. My father was enlisted up to gunnery sergeant, then warrant officer, then was commissioned as a first lieutenant. After the Marine Corps, my dad was the director of emergency management operations for the Army base Fort Rucker in Alabama, and then the director of civil defense for the state. He served with honor and integrity and lived his personal life the same way. He was very patriotic, and he instilled his values in me. I could count on what he said, and he absolutely expected to be able to count on what I said. I wanted to be like my dad. Integrity is doing what's morally right internally. You may have heard, it's what you do when no one's watching. Reputation is what others think of you. Integrity is what you are. The word itself came from the same root word that integrated and whole came from. It's being undivided internally. Integrity is built through the key components of honesty, consistency, accountability, and moral courage. It's the alignment between belief, speech, and behavior. So how does integrity differ from honor? Well, integrity is internal moral consistency. And honor comes from having integrity plus following through on the commitment to uphold principles and accountability outside yourself. When I was finishing high school, I joined the Army National Guard, turned 18 at Fort Sill, Oklahoma during basic training. I was in a field artillery unit throughout college, and it was awesome because at 18, I was driving a 26-ton track vehicle that was a huge cannon and pulling the lanyard and launching artillery shells miles downrange. It was super cool, but there was something I wanted to do even more. I had wanted to fly since before I could remember, and the Marine Corps had a program where you could get a guaranteed seat in flight school. I applied and was accepted and went to the Marine Corps Officer Candidate School during my last summer of college. After I graduated, my father commissioned me into the Marine Corps, and I went off to active duty to the basic school in Quantico, Virginia, 20 years exactly from when my dad had been there. After 6 months there, I went to Pensacola, Florida for flight school. It wasn't easy, but I was diligent and I did my best, and everything worked out for me during training. I even got my first choice of squadron, and I picked that squadron because they had the coolest patch. I had dreamed of flying for so long, and as luck would have it, it turned out I was decent enough and lucky, and I was selected for jets. I got my first choice of training locations, and I did carrier qualifications on the USS America, the Saratoga, and was assigned to fly F-18 Hornets, my dream aircraft. It was awesome, and I did carrier ops on the Abraham Lincoln. I got to drop bombs. I shot rockets and missiles, dropped napalm. I did air-to-air training against F-4s, F-14s, F-15s, F-16s, Harriers, French Mirage 2000s, and former Russian MiG-29s. I was the youngest pilot in my squadron, so new that I didn't have enough hours to go to night vision goggle school when just weeks after finishing F-18 training, I was deployed and flying combat missions over Bosnia. It was pretty exciting stuff, a pretty exciting time. A French Mirage 2000 was shot down, and an Air Force F-16 was shot down during my first deployment. The French crew was captured and held hostage for 104 days. The Air Force pilot was missing when he went down with no communication at all. Briefly, no flights were allowed back into Bosnia during that time because the whereabouts of the Russian-made missile system that got them were unknown, and they didn't want to lose another aircraft. Then, a couple of days later, I was on standby alert, and we got a notification in the middle of the night that his emergency locator transmitter had gone off. The F-18 is a true multi-mission aircraft, and it could carry the HARM missile, which has the ability to detect and destroy surface-to-air missile sites. We were the only aircraft in theater that could target SAMs in that way, so our alert flight was launched to go see if we could find them. There was a concern that it was just a trap, that the beacon had been set off by the enemy, and that the mobile surface-to-air missile system that had shot him down was going to be ready to shoot down anybody responding. I felt a surge of patriotism at the possibility that we could get him back. There was the risk that he was really dead and that the enemy was going to take a shot at us, but the overriding thought I had was, we don't leave our own behind. And it was an honor to go try to recover him. It was a pitch black, dark night with no horizon, and I was the one guy with no night vision. My role as the wingman was to use the HARM missile to shoot the SA-6 site if it turned on to target us, as the lead flew directly overhead the beacon location, going supersonic to make a sonic boom, and hopefully get the pilot to turn on his radio and communicate with us. As we neared the beacon location, AAA anti-aircraft artillery was streaming up at us, and I could see the color because I didn't have the green night vision. And pretty exciting stuff as the lead began his run, and I separated behind, ready to shoot the HARM missile if a SAM system powered up. And as the lead called out to him, there was no response. They didn't power on the surface-to-air missile, and we were low on fuel. So we had to depart. We refueled in flight and returned to base. The next day, an F-16 flying just outside of Bosnia heard a faint radio transmission from the pilot. So he was alive, but they couldn't go in country because they didn't have protection from the SAMs, so they returned to base. And two of our other jets were launched and flew in and went into country, going directly over his head, establishing his position exactly, and relaying communications to a Marine rescue team on the USS Kearsarge. They remained on station and provided cover as the rescue helicopters were on their way to go in. I was on alert again and was standing by to launch to relieve our guys, and the rescue team was so quick and efficient, they got them and they were out, and I didn't get to launch. But the surge of patriotism was something that you could feel so strongly when we got them back. I mean, it was really amazing. And it made me proud to be an American. It made me be proud to be part of our military. Unfortunately, after my second combat deployment, my back was broken at SEER School, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape Training, and I couldn't continue to fly ejection seat aircraft. So I became a flight instructor in a non-ejection seat airplane, teaching brand new Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard pilots. It was a fun and rewarding job, a lot of fun. I also got to train new instructors and giving them their final check flight before they were signed off to fly with new students. It was pretty cool because I would pretend to be a student to evaluate them as instructors, and it gave me a license to steal, because I got to purposely make mistakes like they might see from students. So I'd mess up radio calls, I'd head in the wrong direction to the runway, I'd try to land first on the nose gear, And I'd freak out at the top of a loop and get the plane into a spin or a spiral and test their patience overall. Testing patience is something my mom would say was a skill I developed during my childhood, so maybe I was specially equipped for this role. But they don't have career-long slots for flight instructors. So after 11 years in the Marine Corps, I got out and I went to fly for the airlines. I flew for American Airlines briefly until 9/11 occurred. We were attacked by terrorists on our own soil. And it was a very patriotic time as our nation came together after almost 3,000 innocent civilians were murdered. Patriotism is a sense of connection, pride, gratitude, belonging, and attachment to our nation. It involves caring about the United States and its people, valuing its ideals, culture, and history, and wanting our country to do well. It includes a willingness to contribute, serve, protect, or sacrifice for our country. The willingness comes not from the land upon which our country sits, but from the ideals of liberty, justice, equality, and the constitutional republic that is our form of government. Examples of patriotism in action include voting, community service, respecting national institutions, defending constitutional principles, working to improve our society, and military service. After the attacks on 9/11, I felt the call to go back on active duty. This time, I found an opportunity flying a non-ejection seat reconnaissance airplane doing counter-narco-terrorism missions in the Air National Guard. I was supporting law enforcement from Secret Service, U.S. Marshals, FBI, and DEA to local task forces across the country. I saw the risks our first responders were taking right here at home, going into harm's way. During my career, I wore the uniform of the Army, the Marine Corps, and the Air Force. I also worked closely with the Navy and did carrier operations with them, and did counter-narcotics support with the Coast Guard. I got to do combat operations and was shot at in 2 countries. I got to work with outstanding people from all across our nation and from many other nations. I got to fire all kinds of weapons: the M16, M4, the Law, which is a light anti-tank weapon, the small shoulder-fired or shoulder-launched multi-purpose assault weapon, easy for me to say, the SAW squad automatic weapon, the M60 machine gun, M250 cal machine gun, M9 pistol. I got to throw grenades and detonate plastic explosives. I flew the T-34, the T-2, the A-4, the F-18, A, B, C, and D models, the C-12 and the RC-26, and even got a little stick time in a British L-1011 tanker. I even got some time flying helicopters in the OH-58, the CH-46, and the CH-53. I got to do a lot of things I never expected to do. I had a great ride. Unexpected things like flying inverted and looking down into the Grand Canyon, going supersonic over the ocean, and the shock wave propagating between the clouds and the water, and blowing out windows in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And I was legal. It wasn't my fault. It was the environmental conditions that made it a problem. I survived doing some stupid stuff, like doing a low pass with afterburners on over the MiG-29 when it landed in former East Germany and pulling 7.5 Gs in the landing pattern. Stupid stuff. I mean, you give a jet to a kid in his 20s, what do you expect, right? So throughout my career, I made great friends, but unfortunately, I lost friends in every branch of the military. It was always a great guy with little kids. 2 of my friends in the Marine Corps had babies on the way they never got to meet. One was lost in the Atlantic Ocean while on a night mission in the F-18. There was no radio transmission, no indication of what happened. He just didn't return on time. By this time, I had night vision goggles, and I launched to go out to try to see if I could find him. But even then, and in the days following after an exhaustive search, we never found a piece of the wreckage even. I was assigned as the investigating officer and had to recommend a determination of death after the search concluded and after consulting tables to see how long someone could survive in water that temperature, even if he did make it out of the jet. It hit me hard knowing that his family would eventually read that report and knowing that he had a child on the way. The other friend who had a child on the way was lost in a training crash in the T-34 when he had a maintenance issue when he and a student were doing a simulated low-altitude power loss. I had been the duty officer, and we didn't have a plane available for his flight until the very last minute of the window when his flight could either go or be canceled. It was my call to either cancel the flight or issue him the aircraft, and I issued him the plane. Then I got off duty and received the next plane and went for my flight with my student. Just coming off duty, I knew everybody that was flying. And when a report came in that there had been a crash, we were all instructed to check in. And as everybody checked in, I knew who didn't. And I knew it was JJ, and that he had daughters and a baby on the way. These losses were very personal for me and my wife. When my wife, Shelley, went to deliver food to JJ's widow, and she walked up her house on the driveway, she saw written, "We miss you, Daddy," in chalk by his daughters. Before I had sons, one of my good friends and next-door neighbor, Greg, had a very young son and a toddler, and I used to play with him. And Greg and I ended up on different coasts with orders to different locations, and shortly afterwards he was killed in a crash. His wife dealt with that in part by cutting off contact with us. It was just easier than having that connection. And I wondered how his son would grow up without him. I knew Greg was a great father, and that Nicholas wouldn't get the opportunity to have the support and guidance from him. As I lost more friends over the years and had sons, it made me wonder how my sons would be if I didn't make it home. That made me look into what was available for kids of our fallen. I could find initial grief counseling and a lot of scholarship options, but in the middle, the crucial formative years, not much. Maybe a summer camp or a few days at Disney. But there really wasn't anything for long-term engagement in their own community for lasting positive impact. As I was nearing retirement, I was at my son's soccer games, watching the goodness of them burning energy, interacting with the coach, doing something positive instead of doing something negative. And I absolutely felt a calling that I was supposed to help children of our fallen have that kind of opportunity. I shocked my wife when we went to Dairy Queen after the games, and I told her what I was going to do. Instead of the logical thing of going back to the airlines and earning the big bucks, I started reading about nonprofits and doing research. I would not have picked me for this, but I was able to get numbers from the Department of Defense that at the time there were over 16,000 children under 18 who had lost their military parent. So I knew the need was tremendous. After retiring with about 25 years of combined service, I formed Angels of America's Fallen, a national nonprofit to support children of our fallen military and first responders by engaging them in healthy activities with a coach or an instructor in their local community throughout their entire childhood. At Angels, we believe as a nation, we should all stand by the children of those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country and communities. After the traumatic loss of their parent, children of our fallen are at greater risk of anxiety, depression, substance abuse, dropping out of school, and unfortunately suicide. Military children in particular face unusual circumstances that increase their risk of suicide significantly. Compared to non-military children, they're 30% more likely to have suicidal thoughts. If they lose that military parent, their risk doubles. If that parent was lost to suicide, their risk increases an additional 80%. We support the kids regardless of the cause of death, because to the child, it doesn't matter if it was a combat fatality, a training accident, cancer from burn pit exposure or fire exposure. They have 100% loss of mom or dad. So all it takes to qualify for Angels is that mom or dad served in the military as a first responder and gave all. Currently, about a third of over 600 kids we're going to support this year lost their parent to suicide. Many of them fall through the cracks in the system because the PTSD or depression wasn't well documented, and it's rejected as not being service-connected losses. But we never want to lose a child because their parent made the ultimate sacrifice for our country and communities. So we provide an outlet for their grief during their most crucial formative years to help them mitigate these increased risks they face. When we enroll a child, we commit to keep them enrolled all the way through 19 years old without them having to reapply and maybe lose that outlet. They pick their interests: sports, music, arts, basically anything healthy with a coach or an instructor as a component for mentoring, and then their parent chooses and vets which activity provider in their local community is the right fit for them and meets their needs. Then we contact the activity provider and make the payment directly for the kids' activities. If they want to be a baseball player, a dancer, a gymnast, baker, trumpeter, whatever, trumpet player, I don't know if trumpeter is a word, but we want to keep them engaged in that activity all year long. If their favorite thing is seasonal, we encourage them to find something to do in the off-season. We call to follow up and see how they're doing. And we support the whole family with case management, getting to know them and making referrals to other services they might qualify for. We also do peer support. Connecting our families is something that can be very healing. And our Voices program for those who want to speak to honor their loved one and help raise awareness and resources to pay it forward and support more children who are unfortunately going to come behind them. Unfortunately, our mission is not going away. We continue to pay the price for 2 decades of combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the nature of the military is dangerous, so we're going to continue to lose people. First responders are in harm's way at home, and we'll continue to have them make the ultimate sacrifice for our communities. We currently have over 800 children on our waiting list, and what keeps me up at night is their at-risk youth, and I don't want to lose any of them to the risks they face because their parent gave all. I believe there's a tie-in to this mission for everyone, whether they have a military or first responder connection or not. Everyone probably either had an activity or a coach or instructor that was impactful when they were kids, or they didn't and they wish they had. It's intuitive that being engaged in these pursuits, instead of being withdrawn and depressed or running with the wrong crowd, is good for the kids. But there's ample evidence from studies showing directly the impact of sports, arts, and music, and the impact of a coach in a child's life. Participation in music improves mood, socialization, stress reduction, and facilitates grieving. Participation in the arts is particularly effective in improving self-awareness and self-esteem, which have been shown to have a positive impact on resilience. Children participating in sports are more likely to eat healthy, have increased social integration, higher teamwork and social skills, higher self-confidence, self-discipline, and emotional well-being, and most importantly, lowered suicidal tendencies. Teens who have a coach in their life are less likely to start smoking, and a study of urban boys in basketball showed that having a coach to look up to was one of the highest motivators for them to participate in a healthy outlet. Our own survey of supported families compared to unsupported families shows direct impact from our program. Quantitative data shows proven impact. Compared to unsupported children, those we are supporting show a 90% improvement in their levels of happiness, a 92% reduction in feelings of hopelessness, and a 73% increase in their ability to concentrate. Qualitative data shows served families consistently describe increased child confidence, stronger mentor relationships, improved routines, reduced caregiver stress, and financial relief related to activity access. Unsupported families overwhelmingly identify financial barriers, lack of structured mentorship, and caregiver strain as primary unmet needs. Our program reduces hopelessness, emotional dysregulation, isolation, and caregiver stress. It strengthens belonging, relational attachment, purpose development, and school engagement. In 1855, the great orator and slavery abolitionist Frederick Douglass said, "It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." He was a very wise man, and the words he spoke then are more applicable today than ever. At Angels, we honor our fallen and the sacrifice they made, but just as important, we focus on positives and possibilities for their children. Marine Lance Corporal Andrew Carpenter was shot on Valentine's Day in the Helmand province in Afghanistan while his wife was 8.5 months pregnant with their son. His wife, Chrissy, received word that he had been shot and transported to Germany, and she felt sure he'd be okay. But then she was informed his condition was unrecoverable. His wounds were so grave, the doctors had declared him brain dead, and they wanted her approval to remove him from life support. With all of her world thrown into chaos, she couldn't accept that, and she needed to go see him, but it was so close to her due date she couldn't travel. His parents immediately flew to Germany and got to see their son, but had to call Chrissy and tell her it was true, and she would need to agree to let them remove him from the ventilator. She reluctantly did, and he passed away within minutes. 2 weeks later, his son Landon was born. I saw a picture online of Landon laying on his father's uniform between a photo of his dad with his cover and his boots, and I knew I had to find him. I did, and he became the 5th child we ever enrolled at Angels. It was the first Marine family we supported, and it hit me particularly hard, just reminding me of the friends I had lost and how it was such an honor to support a fellow Marine son. We began supporting Landon in Montessori school as a toddler, then over the years, baseball, martial arts, and music. Last year, 12 years later, Landon came to Colorado Springs and played the drums at our 10th annual anniversary Angel Gala, and it was awesome. And I believe Andrew was granted leave from guarding the streets of heaven, and he was there to watch. and I'm sure he was as proud as a father can be. Landon is 15 now, and we're committed to supporting him 4 more years, all the way till he's a young adult. Nobody has to volunteer or donate to support these children, but time and time again, I get to see the best of people as they choose to do so out of the goodness of their hearts. What I've observed personally and through others is that when one is focused on their own accomplishments or their own self-promotion, they're never satisfied. It never feels good enough, no matter how high the level of success. However, when they focus on serving others, it's so completely satisfying and fulfilling. I encourage everyone to engage in service to something other than themselves. It's so important to understand there are things much bigger than ourselves, things infinitely worth sacrificing for. That could be our country, our friends, our families, our communities, a single child, or over 16,000 of them. My father as a Marine inspired me, and I was raised as a child with the values of the Marine Corps: honor, courage, and commitment. In the Army, I embraced the core values of loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. In the Air Force, I embraced their core values of integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. I'm inspired by those who took great risk to preserve the American way of life. People like the Medal of Honor recipients whose photos adorn these walls. But you don't have to be a Medal of Honor recipient to embody honor, integrity, and patriotism, or to serve your country or your fellow citizens. I'm inspired by great Americans of all walks of life who are joining me in supporting children of our fallen. Great people like retired police officer Henry Jones, who is on our advisory council at Angels, and he's also on the board here at the Center for American Values. The mission statement for the Center for American Values is to honor the extreme sacrifices made to help sustain American values and to ensure those extraordinary actions are preserved forever. That aligns with my personal mission to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom and security by supporting their children left behind. The core values of honor, integrity, and patriotism are American values that helped a fledgling nation transform into the greatest country on earth. We're blessed to be here at this time in this country that went from just 13 colonies 250 years ago to become the nation that has the world's largest economy by GDP, a record we've held for 130 years. We have the world's strongest military. We rank number 1 in the Global Innovation Index. We lead in space with the most lunar missions, the most person days in space. We're the only country to have launched anything into interstellar space. Last year, we performed more orbital launches than the rest of the world combined. We've produced 3 times more Nobel Prize winners than the second country. We're number 1 in the Brand Finance Global Soft Power Index of global cultural influence. We're the beacon of freedom and hope for the world. This year, on July 4th, we'll celebrate something very special, the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. For 250 years, America has been shaped by those who answered the call to serve, on battlefields, in communities, and in moments of crisis. We're built and protected by those who gave all, built on the foundational values of freedom like the world had never seen. No other nation was conceived based on the values and principles that formed the United States. Our founding fathers permanently inscribed revolutionary foundational values for a new nation in the Declaration of Independence. Among the most important were equality. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Inalienable rights, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the sovereignty of the people, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted by men, among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. As those fortunate to be living in this great nation, we should each carry forward the timeless values of honor, integrity, and patriotism, not as mere ideals, but as daily choices. Because when we live these values boldly, we're not just strengthening ourselves, we're strengthening our nation. Honor is not found in words, but in deeds. Integrity is not inherited. It's chosen every single day, even when no one's watching. And patriotism is proven through both. I applaud the mission of the Center for American Values to honor the extreme sacrifices made to help sustain America's values and to ensure these extraordinary actions are preserved forever. I hope we all ensure these values carry on. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. It's been my honor. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you again, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Lewis. Embracing service is awesome, and he's definitely a great example of that. But at this time, actually, if you'll come back up, we do have some time for some questions. So Stacy has the mic. If you wouldn't mind raising your hand, and if you're okay with that, we'll go ahead with some questions now.
Just please make them easy. I'm not that bright.
You said there's an 800 children on the waiting list. What is the reason for the gap? Lack of mentors?
No, it's lack of funding.
Okay.
So for some organizations, a big influx of money might create a lot of problems. For us, it would solve a lot. The program was designed to be very scalable because we're not creating these activities ourselves or having to administer a new program. We're paying for things that already exist in their communities. And so, yes, the only limitation is funding. Yeah.
Firstly, I want to say thank you for what you've done, what you continue to what you continue to do. So my father served 32 years in the Army, and after losing him, I struggled deeply with grief and finding my footing again. From your experience working with military children who have lost a parent, what would you want someone like me and others carrying that kind of loss to remember about moving forward while still honoring the person who shaped us?
Well, that's a great question. First, I'm sorry for your loss. You hear of post-traumatic stress disorder, but there can also be post-traumatic stress growth. And it's among the mindset of don't waste the pain and honoring the sacrifice that was made, but doing so in a way that you are continuing to live in the way they would want to see, I think would probably be my best guidance that I could say for that. That doesn't mean that the hole in your heart won't always be there, but I have the belief that that they'd be up in heaven and they'd be watching. That's my personal belief. And I believe that they'd be proud to see you carrying on and doing well and growing. Yeah.
Hi. First, I would love to say thank you so much for your work. And as a young American, it's something that's truly inspiring to see that these programs are available for kids who are suffering and to get them back on their feet. As a young American, I wanted to ask you, what advice would you have for the next generation to make sure that the values of honor, integrity, and patriotism aren't just words, but that they're truly lived every day?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, as an individual, you can have a tremendous impact. So it doesn't have to be that it takes everyone. It starts with one. Everything starts with one. And that you living those values through your own personal life would be something that others, well, first of all, you're going to be more successful, right? And you're going to be in a position that other people are going to look at and say, well, why does it work out for her and maybe not for me if I'm making bad choices? So living it through your daily actions, through your daily choices is the recommendation that I would give. And that's something that can catch on.
Any other questions?
Oh, I can't believe my wife's not got one for me or something like, when are you going to clean out the garage?
Let me get.
Yeah, great question. We budget $3,000 per year per child. Yeah.
Joe, could you touch upon, we all know about Lessons from Lila, but can you tell the audience about how you came about with Lessons from Lila?
Absolutely. So when I first formed the organization, I was waiting on the IRS to certify us as a 501c3, and I was volunteering with the men's group at church. And one of the guys who knew what I was going to be doing said, hey, you've got to meet this lady. She's moving into my neighborhood, and her husband was the first chaplain to die in combat since Vietnam. and she's got 3 little boys. And I said, oh, that's got to be our first family. So I met her at Chick-fil-A and told her what I was going to be doing and said, hey, I want to just start paying. And so I just paid out of pocket, get going, right? And paid for swimming lessons for her sons. And the youngest one was so little, we did Mommy and Me swim classes for him. And then anytime we had a new toddler enrolled, we'd say, let's get them started in Mommy and Me swim classes. So around that same time, this was fairly early in our existence, and we had an Air Force Master Sergeant with 6 kids. He was a TAC P, multiple combat deployments, but he was killed in a really freak parachute training accident and left his 6 kids behind. His widow registered, and there was a couple of month-long waiting list at that point. And when my wife, Shelley, called her to say, hey, we can enroll your 6 kids, this very positive call, Alyssa said, I only have 5 now. My 2-year-old Lila just drowned. And it absolutely crushed me. If we had grown faster, we would have enrolled her and we would have offered the swimming lessons, and it could have made a difference, and I couldn't go back and change it. As I mentioned, we're focused on positives and possibilities, and I mentioned the don't waste the pain. So I looked at it and said, what can we do? How do we make something come from this? So I called Alyssa, and I said, hey, I don't have the budget for it, but I'm just going to try to convince swim centers to give basic life safety swimming lessons to all the kids on the waiting list. I never want to lose another one like this, and I'd like to name this initiative after Lila. And she was very moved by that, and she came up with Lessons from Lila. We've been doing it ever since. Now when a family registers and they do the online registration, they're asked if their child knows how to swim, and if not, they get swimming lessons even while they wait. So those 800 on the waiting list have been offered swimming lessons. And to go back to also, what do you do after the loss? Alyssa had 5 kids to raise. 13 months after losing her husband, she loses Lila. And one of her brothers was murdered, and one of her brothers committed suicide. And it's too much, right? So what did she do? She got her doctorate in clinical psychology, and she's a grief expert helping others heal now. So, there's that post-traumatic growth. She embodies that. But Lessons from Lila is a crucial piece, and it's something that came out of loss. Thank you.